Hello, my name is Philip Rulo with Rultract, and I am going to talk through the setup and use of the Rultract new thoracic post system. We're going to quickly go over the pieces that are in the tray so you know what you're looking for when the surgeon says that he's ready to set the equipment up. You're going to have your Rultract table clamp. This will be the first piece that you'll pull from the tray. Your bottom post, the top post, the rotating extender bar, and the ratchet assembly. The first piece you're going to pull from the tray will be the table clamp. You'll want to turn the top knob counterclockwise all the way until it stops to be sure that the jaws are open all the way, because we are going to put this on over a drape, so we have to make sure that the jaws are open all the way and that the clamp moves freely. When you put this clamp on the bed rail, you'll notice that on the bed rail there are bolts that hold the rail on the table. When you put the clamp on, you'll want to try to find a spot in between the bolts, ideally, to clamp onto that bed rail. So you want to go in between the bolts. You can also go completely around a bolt, but you don't want to hit a bolt. If you hit a bolt like this, the clamp could rock on the rail and will not tighten securely. When placing the Rultract clamp on the table, we want to put the clamp at either the patient's shoulder or just above the nipple line, depending on the patient's anatomy, where the deepest part of the pectus deviation is, and also depending on procedure. When we are ready to attach the table clamp to the bed rail, be sure that the jaws are open all the way by turning the knob counterclockwise until it stops. Make sure that the jaw is moving freely. Now feel along the bed rail for any possible obstructions and also for the location of the bolts. Once we're able to find the bolt, we want to go ahead and clamp in between the bolts if possible. Now what I do is put the top jaw on the rail, and then I squeeze lightly and then kind of rotate the clamp in. And by doing that, I'm able to be sure that the bottom jaw gets a good grip on the bottom of the bed rail. So I put the top on, squeeze it lightly, rotate it in, and then you will feel that bottom jaw grab the bottom of the bed rail. Now squeeze it together and turn the knob. Don't use the knob to bring the jaws together. Squeeze it together and then tighten the knob. Be sure to give your thumb enough space here so your glove doesn't get stuck. Now you're going to want to turn this knob as tight as you can. Unless you're an extremely strong person, you're going to want to turn this knob as tight as possible, because this clamp has to grab the bed rail as tight as possible so the retractor doesn't wobble on the table. Go ahead and grab it and make sure that it's not moving, and then you're ready to put in the bottom post. Next, you're going to take your bottom post. Now you can see that this bottom post is designed with this bend in it. The bend is designed to go toward the head of the table. Reason being, we're trying to provide more space for the assistant to work and also more space to flip the nuss bars. So we want to be sure that the bend goes toward the head of the table. You can see here that this is a square bottom part of the post. Inside this clamp, there's a square insert. So this will drop into that square insert. If you don't get it to hit all the way down into that square insert, it'll rotate just a little bit. So what you want to do is make sure that it's going 90 degrees toward the head of the table. Put it in, just kind of turn it a little bit until it's properly seated. Once it is, turn the wing handle to tighten the post. Now again, it's very important that the bend goes toward the head of the table in order to provide space for the assistant and also to be able to flip the nuss bars without any obstruction. If you put it in like this with the bend going toward the patient's shoulder, it's going to be very difficult to turn this knob And also this may be in the way when flipping the nus bars. If it goes in like this, it certainly will be in the way of flipping the nus bars. And if it goes in like this with the bend going out toward you and away from the table, we're moving the center of the retractor almost 3 inches away from the center of the chest, which we do not want to do. So it's very important to put this in with a bend going toward the head of the table. We are now ready to place the top post onto the bottom post. You want to make sure that the extended part of the top post goes horizontally over the table and over the patient's chest. So you go ahead and set this on. You may have to just turn it a little bit to make sure that it's properly seated. Next, we're going to put on the rotating extender bar. Now, depending on the patient's anatomy, size, and procedure, we're either going to want to put the rotating extender bar on with the rotating knob on the top, or turn it over and have the rotating knob on the bottom. If the patient is small, we want to have the rotating knob on the bottom in order to bring the retractor down closer to the patient's chest. And of course, if the patient is large, very large, we're going to want to turn the extender bar over to have the rotating knob on the top, which then brings the retractor up higher over the patient's chest. Prior to placing the rotating extender bar on the top post, you'll want to turn the lock knob all the way counterclockwise until it stops. When placing the rotating extender bar onto the top post, I like to have the lock knob going out over the head of the table in order to keep it out of the way. So go ahead and slide it onto the top post, and then the surgeon will decide the ideal location, and then we're ready to turn the lock knob to tighten it down into one of the detents or holes on the top post. When tightening the lock knob down into one of the detents on the top post, you have to move the extender bar until you find the desired location, and then go ahead and turn the lock knob all the way. When it's actually locked down into a detent, you'll see there's a very small gap here by the lock knob. If you are not in one of the detents and you try to tighten this lock knob down, there'll be quite a large gap here. So we have to make sure that it's in one of the detents, and then you will see a very small gap and know that it is locked securely onto the top post. Next, we're going to take the Rultract Ratchet Assembly from the tray. Something very important to look for when you pull the Rultract Ratchet Assembly from the tray is to see if this pin is inserted into the groove or not. If the pin is not in the groove and is in the side of the gearbox like this, it will have to be corrected. So what you'll do, and this can be done in the field, go ahead and hold the ratchet assembly like this. So I'm actually holding it from this side with the handle. I'm holding it together. Now I'm going to turn the spool cap nut just far enough in order to provide enough space to pull this cover back to put the pin back into the groove. Don't turn this too far because it will fall off. So just turn it far enough that you're able to move that pin into the groove, insert it into the groove, and tighten that spool cap nut. Hand tighten it about as tight as you can get it. And now you're ready to place the ratchet assembly onto the top post or rotating extender bar. When attaching the Rultract ratchet assembly to the rotating extender bar or the top post, be sure to turn the lock knob all the way counterclockwise until it stops. I like to have the cable and the spool out over the patient's chest with a handle going out toward the head of the table. So go ahead and slide that into position, find the ideal location, and then turn that lock knob all the way down until you're sure that it is into a detent. When tightening the lock knob of the ratchet assembly onto the rotating extender bar or the top post, you'll want to be sure that the lock knob tightens all the way down so there's a small gap here. That way you know you're in a detent. If you are not aligned properly and you're not tightening into a detent, this lock knob will only turn so far, and then you'll see a large gap here. So this is not properly attached and seated into a detent. So you need to readjust And then you can turn the lock knob all the way down and see there's a small gap here, and it is securely tightened to the rotating extender bar or the top post. Once the ratchet assembly is secure to the rotating extender bar or the top post, the Rultract retractor system is now ready to use.